Hey there friends, welcome back to another Legally Armed America video. I'm of course Paul Glasgow here, the one and only truth pimp, dealing you a vulgar display of logic and reason on a daily basis. Today's logic and reason is going to be deep. It's going to be hard for a lot of people to stomach. There's going to probably be three sets of people that I'll touch today. One will be the people who are brainwashed and have believed every stupid thing they've ever been told about autism and how we got here. Yeah, they don't want to believe anything. Oh, my kids are vaccinated and they're fine. Then there will be the ones who understand that things we put into our bodies affect our long-term health. Then there will be people in the middle who just don't have an opinion, but I think you're going to leave with one today. Let me tell you why this one is near and dear to my heart. A lot of you guys already know this, but I'm going to repeat this anyway. I have a profoundly autistic son. He'll be 17 in a couple of months. When I say profoundly autistic, you may have heard the terms profound or severely autistic. When I wake up in the morning, my son can go to the bathroom by himself. And by the way, when I say my son, he's 185 pounds and he's as tall as I am, 6 foot tall so far. At 16. He wakes up in the morning, he goes to use the bathroom. He comes back into his bedroom. I tell him to take off his clothes so that he can get dressed for school. He puts his pants on, he puts his shirt on. I have to button his shirt. He can't get the buttons right. I have to put his underarm deodorant on. He can't do that. I have to put his belt on. He can't maneuver the belt loops with his belt. I have to set the tightness of his belt. He can't do that. He'll over-tighten it. Then we go to the bathroom. I brush his teeth. He can't brush his teeth. I comb his hair. Obviously, he can't do that. I give him his medication. I fill his glass of water up. Then I take him to school. My son requires constant supervision and constant care. My son can't go off and do things on his own. I bathe my son every single night. I don't sit at the side of the tub. I literally bathe my 16-year-old, 185-pound son every night because he is profoundly autistic. Very limited vocabulary, says a few things that we can kind of understand, but it's not a understandable vocabulary, and it's a very limited one at that. Maybe 25 words, maybe, if I had to just spitball it. So he would be classified as nonverbal, even though he does have some audible presentation that we understand. So this topic is near and dear to my heart. Of course, you guys know that autism rates in America have soared over the past 4 decades, with prevalence climbing from an estimated 1 in 10,000 in the early 1980s to over 1 in 36 children today. And I say today, most of these studies are about 4 to 5 years behind. So when they say, what was it, 1 in 36, I've heard Trump say 1 in 12 for boys. I believe the numbers are going to come out that it's probably 1 in 20. Just overall, down or more increased, more prevalent than the 1 in 36 number. Again, these studies are a good 4 or 5 years behind, and COVID jacked a lot of those studies up also. So we're going to find that those rates are a lot worse today than the 1 in 36 that you hear reported everywhere. And I think a lot of us probably saw different children like that over the years growing up. What we didn't see is the profound autism. I didn't see any of that. I mean, my son literally goes to a school. We didn't see these things back then. I went to a very large high school. I graduated in 1986. I went to a very large high school. I remember 2 that I can remember learning disabled children. One of them I would probably put at a mild functioning autism. He had perfect speech, just that he had a massive amount of awkwardness, and there was another one very similar. None of them had limited to no speech when I was going to school. And again, large high school. I keep hearing people say that, oh, we're diagnosing more. Come on, man. No. I live in the same world. You're looking at numbers and you're looking at reasons to excuse why we have these rapidly increasing amounts of children with autism. It's not because we're casting a wider net. I've heard people say, oh, it's because we diagnose more of them. No. The people themselves didn't exist back then. Not the numbers that you're talking about, the actual people that we see with autism didn't exist back then. So saying that we're casting a bigger net now is really stupid. Yeah, there might be some truth to that. You might be having some super high functioning autistic people that you would never guess were autistic under normal circumstances. In fact, some people are sadly running around out there leading a perfectly normal life and then going, oh, feel sorry for me. I have autism now. I just discovered I have autism. If you just discovered you have autism, you don't have any kind of real form of autism. I'm worried about the children who are struggling, the families who are struggling. No, you don't have autism. You need attention. That's a totally different diagnosis. What began as a medical outlier has become a multi-billion-dollar industry encompassing pharmaceutical companies, private equity firms, therapy providers, marketing agencies, and of course, our favorite, lobbyists. With the rise of insurance mandates and expanded coverage for autism services, especially costly interventions like applied behavioral analysis, you guys that have autistic children know what ABA is, private equity firms have bought out small providers and consolidated the field into massive national chains. These firms extract enormous profits from taxpayer-funded Medicaid and insurance dollars, skimming off funds that were intended to help vulnerable children and families, and paying out outsized returns to executives and investors. As I continue, you're going to see there's a lot of people who don't want autism to go away. Financial rewards are staggering. As of 2025, annual national spending for autism care is estimated at $5 to $7 billion and rising. Private equity managed 85% of all mergers and acquisitions in autism services between 2017 and 2022. That's an astronomical rate. It's not seen in any other healthcare segment out there. Meanwhile, major pharmaceutical companies have, of course, set up dedicated autism research divisions to develop lucrative drugs, expanding their investment in the field. At the same time, public skepticism and controversy grow even louder. So as I'll get more into, here we go with the create a problem, fix the problem. I benefit off of both of them. That's what these people at the pharmaceutical industries are doing. They have managed to, and I don't think purposely, but they have managed to create a problem, and then they don't want it to go away because in turn they have developed medications that they make billions off of that they're using to solve the problem. What's the old saying? Those who create the poison create the pill. Big Pharma spent over $4.7 billion on federal lobbying from 1999 to 2018, far outpacing any other industry in America. 2024 alone, pharma lobbying hit an estimated $294 million at historic highs, with marketing budgets topping $22 billion per year. These funds buy influence, access, policy protections. They shape everything from FDA approvals to vaccine recommendations to insurance reimbursement. And the parallels are striking as the vaccine schedule in America ballooned from just a handful of shots in the 1980s to 72 doses by age 18 today. Lobbying and marketing spending rose in lockstep with those numbers. Critics argue that these financial investments have helped suppress questions about vaccine safety and diverted resources away from independent safety science and support for families with severe autism. I know that is an absolute fact. I've seen it firsthand. The pharmaceutical industry uses its financial clout to maintain public confidence, lobbying against reforms and bolstering its bottom line, even as public trust continues to erode. But they continue to lie to you. Despite decades of mainstream scientific studies denying a link between vaccines and autism, many families and activists remain unconvinced, citing lack of large unvaccinated control groups and pointing to conflicts of interest, regulatory failures, and incomplete safety data. In fact, lawsuits currently challenge the CDC's vaccine schedule, demanding cumulative safety studies and greater transparencies. More on that lawsuit in a minute, but that is a deep one and one that could see some results. Want to hear some interesting numbers? The annual vaccine market in the United States alone sits at $26 billion to $34 billion estimated. Let's hit it right in the middle there and say $30 billion. So $30 billion roughly being made by the pharmaceutical industry for vaccines. You know what it was back in the late 80s, 90s, whenever we had the lower vaccine schedule? $1.5 billion. It's grown from $1.5 billion back, let's say 1990, to today, of $30 billion. Yeah, again, they don't want autism to go away. And the people being lobbied to, I'm talking about congresspersons and politicians, they don't want it to go away either. Big Pharma lobbying sits at $294 million paid out in 2024, with billions spent out over the last 2 decades. But that's our politicians. That's the ones being lobbied right there. We understand that they're technically not brainwashed, but they're just paid off. They're pocketing this money and looking the other way as a result of it. I mean, perfect point is, obviously, not enough politicians have had severely or profoundly autistic children. Otherwise, something would change. Right now, they're happy to make the money. But how is the general public? Because they are. There's a lot of families out there not affected by autism who get real adamant about the whole vaccine thing and everything else about the cause of autism. How are they so brainwashed, you might ask? I mean, I ask myself the same thing. You want to know why? Big Pharma spends right now $22 billion per year in the United States alone, directly shaping consumer and provider behavior with their marketing budget. No wonder the CNNs and even the Fox Newses, no wonder none of these people, no wonder none of these online people out there want to hear anything you have to say about, wait a minute, correlation doesn't equal causation in any kind of way. We're going to ignore correlation. It's because they've spent $22 billion brainwashing people to repeat the same thing because they hear it over and over and over again through ads. And of course, when you have somebody who's getting paid, let's just use, for example, a Jimmy Kimmel, for instance, because we all know he makes $15 million a year. If you have a pharmaceutical company who is one of the sponsors on the Jimmy Kimmel show, well, Jimmy Kimmel has a vested interest to tell you that you're crazy when you ask what causes autism. Why? Because he doesn't want to say anything to upset that pharmaceutical company who might be putting, I don't know, $2 million worth of revenue in his pocket as a result of the commercials and the ads they run in his program. Why is he going to speak out against him? In fact, in the back of his own mind, he may be thinking, that seems a little suspect, but he ain't going to question it. Therefore, people watching his show are thinking, oh, well, Jimmy, he doesn't have a problem with it, so I guess I don't either. And I mentioned the autism care industry like ABA, $5 to $7 billion per year they're making. Increasingly privatized and consolidated by financial conglomerates, these folks are dragging in major dollars. And you guys have seen the increase in the vaccine schedule. I mean, they only gave a few of them. And I'm going to show, just so you guys know, various charts that I put together throughout this program so you guys can see. Because now everybody cares about autism, where before it was silent and nobody questioned anything about it. But now that it's in the forefront of everybody's minds, now we're talking about it. So guess what? They're taking advantage of that at the pharmaceutical companies. You know how? They're charging more for the new vaccines. The old vaccines don't cost as much. New vaccines do cost quite a bit more. So they've capitalized on it. Oh, that's going to cost us more to make, so we have to charge you more. They're not stupid. And it's not just the vaccines where they make their money either. Again, I mentioned earlier, those who create the poison also create the pill. They create all these medications to drug and to treat, quote unquote, the children with autism. So they don't just make all their money with vaccines on the front end. They create the autistic children. And it's not just autistic children taking these drugs, by the way, but primarily they are. Then they create the medication that people with issues, whether it be societal issues or coping issues or whichever, anxiety, a number of different things, or the things directly leading to, okay, your child is autistic. They create these medications that you need to get a prescription for. So they're making money on the back end of it, the front with the vaccines and the back end of it with the treatment of autism and these other ailments. Studies show that more than 40% of autistic children are prescribed psychotropics. In fact, the total U.S. spending on autism spectrum disorder therapeutics, including prescription drugs, is projected to exceed $2.44 billion by 2033. Right now, they're already making about $1.5 billion in these therapeutics. Now, I mentioned that lawsuit earlier. This will surprise you guys. There's a lawsuit currently that's been filed against the CDC. And I think it could bear some results, at least some maybe questions asked, because once people go under oath, and I know that liars and people who are making a lot of money will lie under oath. I get that. I understand. If you can lie on TV to a bunch of families who are suffering, I don't think putting your hand on a Bible is going to affect the words coming out of your mouth. But I digress. This lawsuit claims that the current childhood vaccine schedule of 72 doses has not been scientifically tested for cumulative safety. What that means is the entire schedule as a whole, all 72 shots, haven't been evaluated in long-term studies comparing the total health outcomes of fully vaccinated versus unvaccinated children. You've heard the phrase before, like with COVID, you are the experiment. That's what's happening. The 72 doses they have currently have not been tested. How could you? It's not like they have kids in a lab that they're testing this on. No, you're the experiment. We're the experiment. Our children are the experiment. Only time is going to tell what these 72 vaccines versus the ones they got back in the 80s and 90s, only time is going to tell us what the results of the experiment are. We are the experiment. Another piece of that lawsuit is that no HHS safety reports have been given to Congress since 1998. The 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act requires Health and Human Services to report vaccine safety to Congress every 2 years. These reports stopped in 1998. 1998. 27 years ago was the last report on any kind of vaccine injury to Congress. Now, members of Congress, remember, they're getting all the lobbying money. They're perfectly okay with this report not being discussed with them, or no official report being given to Congress as a whole to say, these are our findings. Why? I showed you the lobbying money. This is money to look the other way. So when Congress says, we don't need that report even though the law requires it, they do that because they've been paid off and they've been paid to say that and to feel that way. And there's actually constitutional violations that are part of this lawsuit. It alleges that violations of the First Amendment by silencing doctors who question vaccine safety, the Fifth Amendment, bodily autonomy and integrity, and the Administrative Procedure Act, claiming some CDC vaccine schedule policies are arbitrary or unsupported by sufficient rulemaking. One of the biggest things they're looking for is to reclassify vaccines from Category A to Category B. Category A is a mandate to administer all these vaccines, where Category B would be, we recommend them, but you can voluntarily give them to your children or you don't have to. Another piece of this lawsuit that they're asking for is something that's a little puzzling, that this hasn't happened yet. The plaintiffs are simply seeking government-mandated research that directly compares health outcomes in children who receive all CDC-recommended vaccines versus those who receive none. Yeah, we do have a control group like that. You may be thinking, does that even exist? The Amish. Trump said it in his speech the other day. They don't suffer with the same things. You want to talk about correlation equaling causation? Why doesn't this happen with the Amish? So we have a control group out there already, right? We have people taking it, we have people not taking it. The control group exists. So we should be comparing that. Why aren't they doing that? I mean, we know why, but the question has to be, why aren't you doing that when they sit in front of Congress? So I mentioned risk versus reward. You've heard the phrase, correlation doesn't equal causation. Really? How did medicine ever advance if they had that same kind of stupid thought process? If correlation was never taken into account, how would you ever know that there's a red flag that we need to chase? When you give medication to somebody, or whenever somebody gets a cold, we have to look at things that happen that correlate with one another to determine, heck, that's symptom recognition by itself is correlation. We have to look at that. That's how you determine what somebody has. You look at the different things that correlate with one another, and you determine at that point, what did they eat? I mean, when your kid gets a tummy ache, isn't it correlation? You don't know that whatever they ate upset their stomach, but you're making a correlation based on what their symptoms are. Oh, well, they ate this and they feel like this. We put the two together. This is probably what happened. It's really basic stuff. Nothing drives medical change more than correlation evidence. Example, aspirin was used for pain long before its mechanism was understood. Penicillin's correlation with recovery sparked its adoption. Even statins and beta blockers were widely used based on observed outcome data before biochemistry was even fully mapped out. These people that mock you for saying correlation does not equal causation fail to provide alternative causes that rise with the same intensity and timing. My point is, something happened. So when you discredit everything else that points to that correlation and potential causation, you've still offered nothing else. Well, okay, fine. You can dismiss all the correlating factors that I have just shown you, which is a lot, but you can't offer me an alternative. So you just threw everything away. You said, let's start from zero again. Well, wait a minute, I got us halfway there with the correlating factors. In probably every other area of medicine, sharp simultaneous increases are a huge red flag that prompts investigation. If a new drug hits the market and suddenly heart failure blows up, and we find that everybody who took that medication had heart failure, what would we do? Would we jump out and go, oh, correlation doesn't equal causation? No, we would explore that immediately. You want me to give you some other major medical breakthroughs that were a direct result of correlation? Here's an obvious one: smoking and lung cancer. The link between cigarette smoking and lung cancer was revealed by epidemiologists who noted a sharp rise in lung cancer deaths mirroring increased smoking rates. For years, this evidence was purely correlational and challenged by skeptics and industry. Remember, we had doctors that were saying that smoking was good for you back then, and nobody questioned that. My point is, when you say, I don't think they would lie to me, the doctors lied back then. What's changed? You think they're more honest today than they were back then? I doubt that. So the next time somebody says, oh, correlation doesn't equal causation, or the next time somebody says, oh, autism existed well before there was Tylenol, really? Nobody said Tylenol was the cause. It exacerbates the whole thing. But the next time somebody says something stupid to you like that, what you need to tell them in return is, lung cancer existed well before cigarettes, and you didn't say cigarettes don't cause cancer. So the risk versus reward. I know because I've seen this. I know that there are vaccine injured children out there. I have one. I've seen it with my own eyes. I watched the progression of my son go from someone with pretty good speech, great eye coordination, contact, a number of things that he did at 3 that he could not do by the time he turned 4. A massive regression. It wasn't just because it happened. It was because of things that were put into his body. We witnessed it. So everybody that has an issue with what I'm saying can kiss my ass, because I witnessed it and experienced it. I know without a doubt for a fact that this happened. But what I want to ask you is, and look, I'm going to be the first one that says there's no one thing that causes it. This is just my opinion. Just like I mentioned the smoking. Everyone who smokes cigarettes, my mom smoked cigarettes from the time she was 17 years old till when she probably died at 76. She didn't get lung cancer. There are people out there who get lung cancer in their 30s who never smoked a cigarette before. So obviously, genetically, people are more, I guess, susceptible to different things out there. So I'm not making the claim. I understand that the same schedule and the same things that probably went into my son have gone into other people also, and they have perfectly normal neurotypical children. That's great. To me, that shows there is a genetic. You can't say it's one or the other. This is not a binary thing. This is not is it genetic or is it vaccines? It's a combination. Stop being stupid. Stop being obtuse about something like this. Let's be honest and let's be adults about this. So yes, I do think genetically there's a genetic component to it. But what if all these kids weren't taking all these vaccines? You saw the numbers that I put out. You saw that everything that I show, there's an increase in the vaccines, there's an increase in autism, and of course there's an increase in profits out there. All of these things rise at about the exact same rate from the same time frame. What if we didn't give all these kids these vaccines? We got 3 or 4 million kids in the United States right now that have autism. Again, 25% of those have profound autism and will never function and be a contributing member of society, right? Again, that's a totally different unanswered question that nobody has learned to deal with yet. What do we do with them when their parents die off? Big question there. But evidence suggests that the number of children diagnosed with autism today is much higher than the number of lives likely saved by the vaccines added to the childhood schedule since 1980. So again, between 2 and 3 million autistic children right now, right? That's a lot. The total number of lives saved by the expanded vaccine schedule, not the pre-1980 core vaccine schedule, it would likely be in the tens of thousands over decades, not millions, much less than the current number of autistic children just in America. That's right. A lot of things we have to consider here. So the vaccines went into effect, and in some cases, I don't dispute all vaccines. I think polio, the eradication of polio, for the most part, was pretty remarkable. And that is a very effective vaccine that was well done, and I don't think driven by greed back then. Obviously, it was a necessity. A lot of people were being injured, not dying, but injured as a result of polio and growing up disabled, right? I want you to keep that 2 to 3 million number of autistic children in the United States in mind when I share these numbers with you. If we stopped administering a diphtheria or tetanus vaccine, estimates are that maybe 500 deaths would occur a year as a result of that. The MMR or measles shot, maybe 50 a year in childhood deaths. Hepatitis B, yeah, maybe 50 deaths a year. Remember, that's the sexually transmitted disease vaccine that a child gets the day they are born. A sexually transmitted disease vaccine the day a child is born. You hear what I'm saying, right? 50 deaths a year as a result of that if we stopped administering that vaccine. HIV, 150 deaths a year. Pneumococcal, maybe 200 deaths a year. Influenza, the flu, maybe 1,000 deaths a year. And we know the flu vaccine is only about 25% effective. So I think you could probably do away with that one altogether, the flu vaccine. The last one I got here, rotavirus, stomach bug, about 20 deaths a year. I mentioned risk versus reward. Do you think that it probably is worth it if you see the numbers that are out there right now? And you can provide no other explanation as to why we have these remarkable numbers of children who can't speak and take care of themselves. Do you think maybe we consider that maybe the risk versus reward is not the payout that we think it is? We've got a whole lot more at risk, children and families' futures, whereas we have a couple of thousand deaths a year at most by not administering. In other words, those things that we're vaccinating for because of the advancements in medication and science and technology, all the advancements we have, putting IVs in whenever somebody gets a stomach bug, and getting that fluid back in them, a number of things that we do like that. These things that we're vaccinating for are not as deadly today as maybe they would have been back in the 1980s. And in fact, I don't remember a remarkable amount of people dying in the 1980s of these very things that we're now giving vaccines for that we didn't back then. So it didn't seem to be a big problem back then. And when the advancements in medicine today, it would be less of a problem. Friends, this is not a paperwork glitch or a technical error or a labeling issue that we have these astronomical numbers. This is one of the most eye-opening things that I've ever seen. But we're told to ignore these massive increases. And as I stated earlier, okay, I'll play your game for a second. Let me ignore the correlation that I can prove to you. Let's ignore my graphs. Let's ignore all my charts. Fine. You tell me what caused that spike. You tell me. You have no suggestion whatsoever to be able to explain the spike that I'm explaining to you with this same increase in a vaccine schedule. Friends, today's epidemic of severe autism is being created by real, measurable changes in our world that we have put in place and built since 1990. Don't let the media gaslight you and distract you from the actual facts. They're out there. I source every single thing. There's not a single thing that I told you today that was my opinion if it involved data. It's all derived from sources that everybody has access to. Yet the media, scientists, politicians, and people on social media are going to gaslight you and try to shame you and act like you're just making this up. You're a conspiracy theorist. You're imagining this. I'm not imagining shit. Friends, if you like the video, please share it, because I can guarantee you YouTube will either take this down, demonetize it, or suppress it, because YouTube absolutely does not agree with anything that I'm saying in this video. So please help me get the word out. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Don't forget, guys, if you're looking for a book to educate yourself and to educate the idiots out there who can't think for themselves regarding mass shootings, go to damnliars.net. Again, damnliars.net, and get my brand new book, Damn Liars.
I'm sorry, I thought this was America.
It's hanging around.